I never expected her to notice me again, let alone remember my favorite coffee. The morning started like every other, gray light spilling into the corner cafe, a barista humming off-key while wiping down the counter. I sat at the window, laptop half open, cursor blinking at nothing in particular. My phone lay face down, a small stack of unsent messages tucked into drafts like unread confessions. She appeared in the doorway just as I was twisting the cap off my thermos. Mid-40s, hair pulled loosely back, glasses perched at the tip of her nose. She scanned the cafe quickly, then her eyes landed on me. A slow, almost imperceptible smile. "Cappuccino, right?" she said, leaning against the counter with her arms folded. Her voice was warm but careful, like she was trying not to rush anything. I blinked, half startled. Yeah, that's right." She nodded, tilting her head. "Figured. You never change." There was a pause, one of those that isn't uncomfortable but full of all the things you don't say. I noticed the way her fingers tapped lightly on the counter, the faint glint of a ring catching the morning sun. My hand twitched, almost reaching out, but I kept it folded neatly around my cup. "I'm heading upstairs for a bit," she added casually, "come quietly, if you want." My stomach pinched. Upstairs? Quietly? I forced a shrug, tried to make it sound like I didn't care. Sure." She smirked, eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'll wait." I watched her leave, the door clicking softly behind her. The cafe felt suddenly too small. My coffee steamed in front of me, alone now, its heat failing to chase away the quiet ache of routine. I picked up my phone, stared at it like it might suddenly hold instructions, then set it back down. A laugh floated in from another table. Not hers. I missed it immediately. The ride up in the elevator was just the hum of machinery, the faint smell of disinfectant, and my own shallow breathing. I couldn't stop noticing the way her name echoed in my head, like it had been there all along and I'd just forgotten. She opened the door before I could knock. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender, or maybe it was just her. She leaned against the frame, a stack of papers in one hand, the other brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Come in," she said softly, almost like she was admitting a secret she shouldn't. I stepped inside, aware of every small sound, the click of my shoes on the hardwood, the quiet shift of her weight, the pause before she handed me a folder. Our fingers brushed. I pulled back too fast, embarrassed, but there was a fleeting spark in her gaze that made me think she'd noticed anyway. We both sat on the couch, just a few feet apart. Silence stretched like a rubber band, not empty but heavy with unspoken acknowledgement. I tried to focus on the folder, the papers, anything. My eyes kept flicking toward her hands, folded neatly on her lap. "You've been quiet today," she said finally. "Just thinking," I mumbled, not wanting to elaborate. She nodded, and for a moment, it felt like she saw something in me that no one else did. Something private, like the small loneliness I carried around in pockets of unsent texts and paused thoughts. Then, she stood abruptly. "I'll be back in a minute." I nodded, unsure if I should follow or wait. The door closed softly behind her. My hand hovered over the folder. My chest tightened. And then my phone buzzed. A text. From her. "Don't take too long, come upstairs quietly." She returned with a small tray, 2 cups of tea, the steam curling lazily into the air. I hesitated at the doorway for a second, then stepped closer, trying not to look too eager. "You always make it like this?" I asked, nodding toward the tray. She smiled, a small tilt of her head. "Not always. Just mornings that need it." I watched her pour the tea, careful hands steady despite the slight tremor I noticed only because I was staring too long. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon and something warmer, like cinnamon. I carried the tray over and set it between us on the low coffee table. We sipped in silence. I caught her eye once, and she looked away quickly, pretending to examine the steam rising from her cup. That pause, long enough to notice, short enough not to speak, it made my chest tighten. I used to live in the city, she said suddenly, almost as if testing the waters. Not this apartment. A smaller one, near the park. Before everything changed. I nodded, unsure what everything meant but sensing it carried weight. Sounds different. She shrugged, tracing the rim of her cup with a finger. It was quieter. But sometimes, too quiet. Her eyes flicked toward me, and for a heartbeat, I wondered if she was looking for company, or testing if I could be trusted with the truth. I imagined all sorts of scenarios, none of them safe to say aloud. Sitting here, just a few feet apart, it was impossible not to feel the tension of what we weren't allowed to touch. The age difference, her life already mapped in ways mine wasn't. I thought of a friend's warning that I couldn't even repeat, and I let it fade into the background, because this felt like the only quiet place I had. You ever miss it? I asked, my voice softer than I intended. She paused. Her eyes softened, then hardened for a fraction of a second. Every day. But some things don't come back. I imagined myself in that other apartment, watching her move through a life that didn't include me. And yet here she was, sitting across from me, her hand resting lightly on the table. Not touching mine, but close enough that I wanted to reach. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable but electric. I found myself noticing the way her sleeve had slipped slightly, revealing the curve of her wrist. She noticed me noticing, I was sure of it, but said nothing. Finally, she pushed her cup toward me, her fingers brushing the edge of mine. I flinched slightly, then steadied my hand to take it. The contact was fleeting, but in that small gesture, I felt something unspoken pass between us, acknowledgement, maybe, or permission, or a quiet dare. She smiled then, softly, a private joke shared in the space between words. Don't tell anyone, she said, though the corners of her mouth lifted in a way that betrayed the seriousness of her tone. I didn't answer, just nodded. The moment lingered longer than it had any right to. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I kept finding reasons to linger. Her apartment smelled faintly of old books and something sweet, maybe the candles she always lit. I leaned against the counter, pretending to examine a shelf, but my eyes kept drifting. She caught me staring once. Just a flick of her gaze, subtle, like she noticed and didn't want to say anything. I looked away, pretending to read a label on a jar of sugar. You still drink it black? She asked softly, breaking the quiet. I nodded. Yeah, always. She poured another cup anyway, handing it to me like it wasn't significant. Her fingers brushed mine just slightly. I froze. She didn't pull away, but her eyes shifted somewhere else, focused on something distant. Something in that glance made me hesitate. Maybe she wasn't ready, or maybe I wasn't. A knock at the door startled both of us. She glanced toward it, a sharp twitch of her lips, and murmured, probably just the delivery guy. I stood awkwardly, feeling suddenly out of place. My hand hovered near hers, but I didn't move. The air felt thicker, charged, like it could crack. After the knock faded, she sank onto the couch, a small sigh escaping. Sorry. That always interrupts. I moved closer, careful, aware of the small space between us. My heart thudded in a way I wasn't sure she'd notice. She tilted her head, eyes catching mine for a beat too long. I wanted to lean in, just enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder, but she shifted, just slightly, and the moment slipped. Her hand rested near mine again. I noticed the faint tremor when she reached for her tea. I wanted to take it, wanted to hold it, but I stopped myself. There was something unspoken there, something she wasn't ready to voice. I imagined all the ways this could go wrong. A friend showing up, a phone call, someone noticing. I imagined her pulling away completely, leaving me standing with a coffee cup I didn't finish. And yet, there we were. Feet almost touching, hands hovering in dangerous proximity, silence stretching long enough for a confession to nearly escape my lips. I started, then stopped. The words caught in my throat. She looked at me, lips parted slightly, eyes wide. Hesitation hung between us like smoke. I could almost feel the brush of her hair, the tilt of her chin, the warmth of her breath. The doorbell rang again, sharper this time. She flinched, just slightly. The spell broke. I exhaled, slowly, letting my hand drop to my side. She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with a finger, like nothing had happened. But it had. The air still buzzed, a quiet electricity neither of us wanted to name. I sat back a fraction, careful not to move too close. My mind replayed the near confession, the almost kiss that hovered like a question mark, unresolved. And when I finally dared to glance at her, she gave me that small, almost mischievous smile, as if she knew exactly what we had almost done, and what we had yet to. The park was quieter than usual. Leaves whispered underfoot, the late afternoon light slanting gold across the benches. I followed her slowly, not sure if I wanted to talk or just walk. She stopped, turning toward the small pond at the center, tossing a stone lightly into the water. The ripples spread, then faded. I didn't speak immediately. My hands dug into my pockets, fingers curling around the edges of nothing. You ever feel like you're not supposed to want something? She asked suddenly. Her voice was low, casual, but I caught the tremor beneath it. I glanced at her. She wasn't looking at me, but her shoulders were tight, a tension I'd never seen before. Sometimes, I said. I think about things I shouldn't. Her head snapped toward me, eyes searching mine for a moment longer than necessary. Do you ever regret it? I swallowed. The question felt heavier than it should. I wanted to answer, but all the words tangled in my throat. My heart pounded in a way that made me aware of every small movement, the way her hair caught the light, the gentle tilt of her head, the way her fingers traced the railing of the bench. I don't know, I admitted finally. I think about it too much. And then I freeze. She let out a small, bitter laugh. Freeze. That's one way to put it. Her eyes flicked toward the pond again. I wanted to reach out, touch her arm, reassure her, but the space between us felt sacred, like a line we weren't supposed to cross yet. The tension was quiet but unbearable. I imagined every possible scenario. What if someone saw? What if I pushed too far? What if she pulled away completely? And still, I wanted to speak, wanted to lean in, wanted to let the wall drop. She started, voice breaking slightly. She stopped, swallowed, and looked down at her hands. I don't know why I do this sometimes, invite you in. My chest tightened. The words were small, but they carried more weight than anything either of us had said before. I could see the conflict in her eyes, desire, fear, guilt, all tangled together. I whispered, uncertain. I think. I want to be here. With you. But I don't know if I should. She laughed softly, almost to herself. You're honest, she said, barely above a whisper. Honest when it's inconvenient. The wind shifted, brushing past us, lifting stray hairs from her neck. I noticed every detail, the line of her jaw, the curve of her shoulders, the way she hesitated before speaking. And then she looked at me, eyes wide, vulnerable, almost daring. The air between us stretched taut. I felt like the next word, the next movement, could change everything. I wanted to ask, to tell her what I felt, to name the quiet ache that had been building for weeks. But the question hung unspoken, hovering like a promise or a warning. Would she let me cross the line, or would I have to step back and wait, again? The next day, the apartment felt different. I knocked lightly, half expecting her usual warm smile. The door opened just enough for her to peek out, eyes guarded. "Hey," I said, voice careful, like I didn't want to startle her. "Hey," she replied, flat, almost rehearsed. She stepped back, letting me in, but the space between us felt wider than ever. She moved differently that day, precise, clipped, careful. I kept noticing the small shifts, the way she avoided eye contact, the way her fingers fiddled with the edge of a book instead of reaching for my hand. My chest tightened with every gesture, the rhythm of our quiet intimacy interrupted. "I have to finish some things," she said, voice low. "Later." I nodded, pretending not to notice the change. Later had become uncertain. I lingered near the couch, watching her retreat into her own world, the teacup untouched. Later stretched into hours. I checked my phone compulsively, unsent texts piling up like small confessions I couldn't deliver. I imagined reasons, work, an old friend, something else I wasn't meant to know. Every scenario twisted in my chest, pulling me between hope and doubt. Then I noticed a photo on the counter, half hidden behind a stack of papers. A younger man, maybe mid-20s, standing next to her, smiling. My stomach sank. The corner of the frame showed a child's hand resting on his shoulder. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. The space between us suddenly carried everything unsaid. For days, our routine fractured. My steps slowed when I reached her door, unsure if knocking would be welcomed or rebuffed. Messages went unsent, calls unanswered. Each small hesitation felt monumental. I imagined her life continuing in quiet bursts without me, the flick of a hair, the curve of her smile reserved for someone else, the weight of responsibilities I wasn't part of. I replayed our last walk, the tension of near confessions, the way her hands had hovered just out of reach. And yet, every time I passed her apartment, I felt the pull of what had been building for weeks, the almost there, the almost hers, lingering like a shadow I couldn't step out of. I wrote her a message that never left my drafts: "I miss the way you look at me." I stared at it for hours, then deleted it. The cafe felt emptier when I passed it. The table by the window sat unused, the coffee cold in memory. I flicked my gaze to her favorite chair, now empty, and I realized it wasn't just absence, it was paused presence. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I waited for a door to open, for a message to arrive, for a chair to be filled, anything that would remind me we weren't still suspended, hanging in a quiet ambiguity that had become almost unbearable. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and rain, a quiet calm settling over the space. I stood near the doorway, unsure if stepping inside would be brave or foolish. She leaned against the counter, hands wrapped around her own mug, staring at the steam curling above it. We didn't speak at first. Just the low hum of the refrigerator, the occasional drip of water from the faucet. My heart pounded, though I tried to make it small, manageable. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said finally, voice low, almost tentative. I shrugged, though my fingers tightened around the strap of my bag. I almost didn't. But I stopped. The words caught. Too many thoughts tangled together. I wanted to say it all at once, but I couldn't. She watched me carefully, like she knew I was deciding something inside myself. The tension in her shoulders was subtle, but I noticed. I wanted to reach for her hand, wanted to cross the space, but I held back. You don't have to, she added quickly. If it's too much, I know, I interrupted gently. I know it's complicated. And it was. The weight of unsent messages, the pause of days without contact, the small, impossible differences that made this forbidden and inevitable all at once. I stepped closer anyway. Not too close. Just enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her mug, enough to notice the small crease of worry at the edge of her eyes. I can't keep pretending I don't notice you, I said softly, voice barely more than a whisper. Anne. I don't want to. She tilted her head, eyes searching mine. The air between us thickened, charged with everything we hadn't said, every pause, every almost touch, every glance that lingered too long. She stopped herself, sighing. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug, slow, deliberate. I've been scared. Scared of losing control, I guess. Or maybe, losing you. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle into me. I'm scared too, I admitted. But maybe we can try. Carefully. A small laugh escaped her, almost embarrassed. Carefully, she repeated. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't dramatic. It was cautious, human, real. We stood like that for a long beat, just breathing, letting the words and silences coexist. I reached out slowly, fingertips brushing hers, tentative but deliberate. She didn't pull away. For a moment, nothing else existed, not the complications, the unsent texts, the what-ifs. Just the warmth of a hand held lightly, a quiet acknowledgement of connection. She looked up, a small, almost shy smile tugging at her lips. Okay, she said softly. Okay, I echoed, relief threading through the word. No grand declarations. No cinematic flourish. Just a human, quiet, shared understanding, enough to start, enough to matter. Months passed, though it didn't feel like months. Just small increments of time, measured in mornings at the cafe, afternoons walking through the park, evenings with tea cooling in delicate cups. 8:47 a.m. became ours, a quiet ritual of black coffee and gentle conversation before the day started for everyone else. The apartment smelled of rain one morning, lemon on the counter the next. I learned the precise way she liked her tea, and she remembered how I folded my napkin after each sip. These tiny, ordinary gestures became the markers of our life together, unnoticed by anyone else but essential to us. I'd see her reading a book, loose hair slipping across her forehead, and feel the same quiet ache I'd felt the first time I lingered too long in her doorway. Only now, it wasn't an ache of longing or uncertainty. It was the steady pulse of familiarity, of someone choosing you each day without fanfare. We didn't speak in grand declarations. That had never suited either of us. Instead, the closeness lived in moments, sharing an umbrella, adjusting a sleeve, a look held a beat too long over a steaming cup. Silence was never empty, it was full of all the words we didn't need to say. I noticed the park bench again, the one by the pond where we had nearly confessed too much, nearly crossed the line. We returned to it sometimes, not to relive tension but to honor it, a reminder of where we had been and what had been fragile. Her laughter came more easily now, unguarded, small quirks slipping through in ways they hadn't before. And I laughed with her, not because I had to, but because something in that sound reminded me why all the waiting, all the hesitation, had mattered. One evening, she handed me a cup of tea exactly how I liked it, black with a hint of honey, a compromise she knew I'd appreciate. I smiled, brushing a stray hair from her shoulder, and for a moment, we simply existed together. The air held a quiet warmth, familiar, unremarkable, perfect in its simplicity. We didn't need to speak about the past or the complications we'd navigated. The cracks, the near misses, the messages left unsent, they existed as soft shadows behind our light. Life was not perfect. It never would be. But it was ours. And as I sipped the tea, letting the warmth sink in, I realized I finally understood what had drawn me here all along. Not desire. Not urgency. But recognition. That small, unspoken knowledge that someone finally sees you and chooses to stay. I caught her gaze, and she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. I returned it. No words passed, but in that moment, we both understood, some things are quiet, some things are patient, and some things, the ones that matter, are quietly earned. And later, in the soft hush of evening, I thought, not everyone will notice, not everyone will understand, but we do. That's enough. 5.